Hi there, I'm Jessica Morgan, and let me tell you, nothing prepares you for coming home from a business trip to find your mother-in-law has moved into your rental property without permission, especially when she's the same woman who told your husband you weren't financially responsible enough for him. It wasn't just the unauthorized move-in. It was years of underhanded comments wrapped in fake smiles. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The countless family dinners where she questioned my career choices, the holidays where she reminded everyone how she helped her poor son before he met me. But the worst part? She didn't just invade my property, she redecorated it completely, then had the audacity to tell me I should be grateful she fixed it up. You think that's bad? Wait until you hear how far she went before I finally revealed exactly who she was dealing with. The air conditioning hit me like a wave of relief as I walked through the airport terminal in Phoenix. After a week-long conference in Seattle, all I wanted was to get home, kick off my heels, and spend the weekend recovering before jumping back into work on Monday. I adjusted my carry-on strap and checked my phone. 2 missed calls from my husband, Mark, and a strange text. Mom's having some issues with her condo. Call me when you land. My name is Jessica Morgan. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a real estate investment manager for a mid-sized firm in Arizona. I specialize in identifying undervalued properties, renovating them, and either flipping them for profit or adding them to our rental portfolio. I'm good at what I do, really good, though my mother-in-law, Patricia, has never quite believed it. "A woman playing with houses," she once said at Thanksgiving dinner. How cute. I had met Mark 6 years ago at a charity fundraiser. He was handsome, kind, and worked as an architect at a respected firm. We clicked immediately, bonding over our shared love of design and old buildings. Mark understood my passion for real estate and supported my career wholeheartedly. We married after 18 months of dating, much to Patricia's poorly concealed dismay. "Are you sure you wouldn't like a longer engagement?" she had asked Mark, not me, at our engagement dinner. "You've only known each other for such a short time." Since then, Patricia had maintained a cool politeness toward me, the kind that never reached her eyes. She sent passive-aggressive texts checking if I was taking good care of her son, and made comments about how Mark had always been attracted to strong personalities. Every conversation felt like navigating a minefield of backhanded compliments and thinly veiled criticism. As I walked to the rideshare pickup area, I called Mark back. "Hey, you landed. How was the flight?" His voice sounded strained beneath the attempted cheerfulness. "Fine. Just long. What's going on with your mom's condo?" There was a pause, the kind that instantly sent warning signals through my brain. Well, there was a major pipe burst in her building yesterday. The whole place is flooded. Insurance will cover it, but they're saying it'll take at least 2 months for repairs. I felt a headache forming behind my eyes. That's terrible. Is she staying with Aunt Carol? Patricia's sister lived about 20 minutes from her. Another pause. Longer this time. Not exactly. She's staying at the Saguaro property. I stopped walking so abruptly that the man behind me nearly collided with my suitcase. The Saguaro property was a small 3-bedroom house I'd purchased last year as an investment. It was in a quiet retirement community called Desert Palms, about 30 minutes outside Phoenix. I'd recently finished renovations and had been planning to list it for rent next week. "What do you mean she's staying there? How does she even have access to it?" My voice was dangerously calm. "I know I should have called you first," Mark rushed to explain. "But you were in back-to-back meetings, and Mom was panicking, and I still had the keys from when I helped with the landscaping last weekend." "So you just gave her the keys to my investment property without asking me?" I could feel my blood pressure rising. "Mark, we were going to rent that place out next week. The listing photos are scheduled for Tuesday. It's just temporary, he promised. 2 months max and she'll be out. She's really grateful, Jess. I took a deep breath, counted to 10 in my head, and reminded myself that I was in public and shouting at my husband over the phone wouldn't solve anything. We'll talk about this when I get home, I said finally. The ride to our house in the Arcadia neighborhood of Phoenix was a blur of text messages from my assistant about Monday's meetings and my own swirling thoughts. I tried to be reasonable. Yes, Mark should have consulted me before giving his mother the keys to my property. But it was an emergency, and Patricia was family. 2 months would delay my rental plans but wouldn't completely derail them. We could make this work. By the time I arrived home, I had convinced myself to be gracious about the situation. Mark met me at the door, looking apologetic and relieved that I wasn't storming in with guns blazing. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, taking my suitcase. "I know I should have waited to discuss it with you." I gave him a quick kiss. "It's okay. It's not ideal, but it's only for 2 months. We'll figure it out." His shoulders relaxed. "Thank you for understanding. Mom's actually been really pleased with the house. She says the renovation work is lovely." That was high praise from Patricia, who typically found flaws in everything I touched. Maybe this unexpected arrangement would actually help improve our relationship. "That's good to hear," I said, kicking off my shoes. "Has she moved in already?" Mark nodded. "Yesterday. I helped her bring over some essentials, but most of her stuff is in storage until her condo is fixed." "Well, I should probably go over tomorrow and make sure she's settling in okay," I offered, surprising myself with my own magnanimity. "Maybe bring her some groceries or something." Mark's face lit up. "That would be amazing, Jess. Thank you." The next morning, after a much-needed night's sleep in my own bed, I drove to Desert Palms with a car full of groceries and household supplies. The Saguaro property was a charming 1970s ranch-style home that I'd modernized while maintaining its southwestern character. New energy-efficient windows, updated kitchen and bathrooms, but the same terracotta roof tiles and desert landscaping that matched the community's aesthetic. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. There were 4 large planters flanking the front walkway, planters I definitely hadn't installed. And the desert-friendly xeriscape I'd carefully designed had been partially dug up, replaced with what looked like the beginnings of a rose garden. My chest tightened as I got out of the car. I hadn't even made it to the front door before it swung open to reveal Patricia, looking perfectly at home in linen pants and a flowy top. "Jessica, what a surprise," she said, as though I was dropping by her house uninvited rather than my own property. "Mark didn't mention you were coming." "I brought some groceries and supplies," I said, gesturing to my car. "Thought you might need them while you get settled." "How thoughtful," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Come in. I've been making a few little improvements." The moment I stepped inside, I froze. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Little improvements was the understatement of the century. The neutral grayish walls I'd painted were now a bold turquoise in the living room. The sleek ceiling fan I'd installed had been replaced with a chunky Southwestern-style light fixture with dangly bits. And the worst part, the beautiful hardwood floors I'd had professionally refinished were now covered with a massive area rug in a pattern that could only be described as aggressively tribal. "What do you think?" Patricia asked, beaming with pride. The place had potential, but it was so plain before. No personality at all. I stood there, speechless, as she led me through the rest of the house, pointing out all the changes she'd made in less than 48 hours. She'd replaced the shower curtain, changed out all the cabinet hardware, installed new blinds, and somehow acquired and arranged a house full of Southwestern-themed decor that looked like it had been purchased at a gift shop in Sedona. When did you... I couldn't even form complete sentences. "Oh, I've been busy," she laughed. "Mark helped with some of the bigger things yesterday, and I had the workers from Southwest Home Decor deliver and install the rest this morning. They're so efficient." "Workers? Patricia, you've been here for one day?" I managed to say. She waved dismissively. "The place needed a woman's touch, Jessica. It looked like one of those sterile model homes. Nice enough, but who could actually live like that?" I had designed it specifically to appeal to the broadest range of potential renters. That was the point. "I had the property staged professionally," I said carefully, "for the rental listing photos that were supposed to be taken on Tuesday." Patricia's eyebrows rose. "Well, it looks much more homey now. Your renters will thank me. Speaking of which, Mark mentioned you were planning to rent it out. I was thinking, since I'm going to be here for a couple of months anyway, maybe I could just become your tenant. The location is so much more convenient than my condo, and I've already made it feel like home." My mind was racing. Not only had she completely redecorated my investment property without permission, but now she wanted to stay permanently? Before I could respond, she continued. "Of course, I'd expect a family discount on the rent. After all, I've already invested quite a bit in improvements." I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. "Improvements? Patricia, you completely changed. The property without asking. I'm going to have to redo everything before I can list it now." Her smile tightened. "I think you're overreacting, dear. Most people would love what I've done with the place. It has charm now. Character." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this was my husband's mother and that starting a fight wouldn't solve anything. "Let's talk about this later. Where do you want me to put these groceries?" As I unpacked bags in the kitchen, which had thankfully escaped any major alterations beyond new hand towels and Southwestern-themed oven mitts, Patricia chatted about the neighborhood. "The ladies in the community center are just lovely. I've already joined their book club and signed up for water aerobics. Did you know there's a waiting list to get into Desert Palms? People absolutely love it here. I did know that. It was one of the reasons I'd purchased the property. Desert Palms was an established, desirable community for the 55-plus crowd, with excellent amenities and strong property values. The community manager, Ron, such a nice man, was telling me all about the upcoming renovations to the clubhouse. They're adding a movie theater room and expanding the fitness center. Can you imagine?" I nodded absently, wondering how Patricia had managed to make more social connections in one day than I'd made in the entire year I'd owned the property. After putting away the groceries and politely declining Patricia's offer to stay for lunch, I've made my famous tuna casserole. I practically ran back to my car. I needed to talk to Mark. Now. When I got home, I found Mark in his home office, working on blueprints for a new project. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it. "Your mother redecorated my entire house," I said without preamble. He looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, she painted the walls, changed the light fixtures, covered the hardwood, floors with area rugs, and filled the place with Southwestern kitsch in less than 48 hours. And now she wants to become my tenant permanently." Mark's eyes widened. She didn't mention any of that to me. I helped her move some boxes yesterday, but the place looked the same when I left. Well, it doesn't look the same now. She apparently hired people to come in and fix it up this morning. I made air quotes around "fix it up" to emphasize my point. He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sure she thought she was helping. You know how she is. She can't just live in a space without putting her own stamp on it." "This isn't about her stamp, Mark. This is about boundaries. She moved into my property without asking me directly, and then made significant changes without permission, and you enabled it by giving her the keys." "It was an emergency, Jess," he replied defensively. "What was I supposed to do, let her stay in a hotel?" "You were supposed to call me." I felt my voice rising and took a breath to calm down. "Or at least present it as a question, not a fait accompli." Hey Jess, Mom's in a bind. Would it be okay if she used the saguaro place temporarily? That would have been the appropriate approach. Mark had the grace to look sheepish. You're right. I should have asked you first. I'm sorry. I sat down in the chair opposite his desk, suddenly exhausted. This isn't just about the house, Mark. It's about your mother not respecting me or my property. And now she wants to stay there permanently with a family discount because of all the improvements she's made. He winced. That's not happening, right? Of course not. But now I have to be the bad guy who kicks poor Patricia out of her newly decorated nest and sends her back to her flood-damaged condo. Mark reached across the desk and took my hand. You're not the bad guy. I'll talk to her, explain that we already have rental plans for the property. She'll understand. I raised an eyebrow skeptically. Okay, she probably won't understand, he admitted. But it's your property, your decision. I'll back you up completely. I squeezed his hand, grateful for his support even if it was coming a bit late. Thank you. And we need to figure out how to undo all her improvements before she causes any more damage. Later that evening, as we were getting ready for bed, Mark's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. It's Mom. I paused in the middle of applying moisturizer to my face. Put it on speaker. He hesitated, then nodded, answering the call. Hi, Mom. You're on speaker. Jess is here too. Oh. Patricia sounded momentarily flustered. Hello, Jessica. I was just calling to thank you again. For the groceries. So thoughtful. You're welcome, I replied neutrally. And I wanted to let Mark know that I got a quote from the landscapers for finishing the front yard. The rose garden is going to be stunning once it's complete. Mark shot me a panicked look. Mom, about the house. Oh, and the painters are coming back on Monday to do the bedrooms, she continued as if she hadn't heard him. I'm thinking a nice sage green for the master and perhaps a soft yellow for the guest room. Very soothing colors. I couldn't stay silent any longer. Patricia, you need to cancel those workers. You can't keep making changes to the property. There was a pause, then a small laugh. Don't be silly, Jessica. The place needs these improvements. Trust me, I've been decorating homes longer than you've been alive. That's not the point, I said, trying to keep my voice level. The point is that it's not your house to decorate. Well, it's my home for now, she replied, a hint of steel entering her voice. And if I'm going to live somewhere, it needs to be up to my standards. Mark intervened. Mom, Jess is right. You can't make permanent changes to the property without permission. We need you to cancel the painters and the landscapers. I see. Her voice had cooled considerably. So you're taking her side, as usual. It's not about sides, Mom. It's about respecting Jess's property. Property, property, property. That's all she cares about, isn't it? Not family, not making an elderly woman comfortable after she's been displaced from her home. I bit my tongue to keep from pointing out that at 62, Patricia was hardly elderly, and that her displacement was temporary. We understand you're in a difficult situation, Mark said diplomatically. But that doesn't mean you can redecorate Jess's investment property without asking. Investment property, Patricia scoffed. As if playing around with real estate is a real job. In my day, women had actual careers, not hobbies their husbands financed. And there it was, the core of Patricia's disdain. She had always believed that Mark bankrolled my real estate ventures, that I was playing businesswoman while living off her son's architect salary. She had no idea that I'd come into our marriage with my own substantial savings and investments, built through years of careful planning and smart property decisions. Mark's face hardened. Mom, that's completely out of line. Jess is extremely successful at what she does, and my income has nothing to do with her investments. Oh, please, Patricia said dismissively. Where would a young woman get the money? For all these properties? I wasn't born yesterday, Mark. I'd had enough. Patricia, I need you to cancel the workers. No more changes to the house effective immediately. We can discuss your living situation tomorrow when everyone's had a chance to cool down." "Fine," she said stiffly. "Good night." Mark ended the call and turned to me with an apologetic expression. "I'm so sorry, Jess." She was completely out of line. I sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. "She's never going to respect me, is she?" He sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "She's from a different generation. She doesn't understand women like you. Independent, successful, making your own way." "Maybe," I conceded. "But she's been undermining me since the day we met, and it's getting worse, not better." Mark didn't disagree, which told me everything I needed to know. The following day was Sunday, and I spent the morning researching what it would cost to undo Patricia's improvements. New paint, reinstalling the original light fixtures, if she hadn't discarded them, removing the hardware she'd installed. It was adding up to thousands of dollars and at least a week's delay in getting the property on the rental market. Around noon, I received a text from Mark, who had gone to play golf with colleagues. "Mom called, says she has a surprise for us at the house, wants us to come for dinner at 6. I frowned at my phone. A surprise? That couldn't be good. "What kind of surprise?" I texted back. "No idea. Should we go?" I considered refusing, but decided it might be an opportunity to clear the air. "Okay, but we need to set firm boundaries." "Absolutely," Mark replied. "I'll be home by 5 to pick you up." I spent the afternoon mentally preparing myself for whatever Patricia might have in store. Best case scenario, she had come to her senses and wanted to apologize. Worst case. Well, I tried not to think about what other improvements she might have made. At 6 p.m. sharp, Mark and I arrived at the Saguaro property. The front yard looked even worse than yesterday. The xeriscape, now completely torn out, replaced with freshly turned soil in preparation for Patricia's rose garden. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from commenting as we walked to the front door. Patricia answered, wearing an apron and a wide smile. "There you are. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready." We followed her inside to find the dining room. Table elaborately set with what appeared to be new china and crystal glasses. The turquoise walls had been adorned with various Southwestern-themed artwork, and there were fresh flowers everywhere. "What's all this, Mom?" Mark asked, looking around uncertainly. "Well, after our conversation last night, I realized I needed to show you both how lovely this place could be with the right touch," Patricia explained, gesturing proudly at her handiwork. "I've prepared a special dinner to say thank you for letting me stay here." I nodded stiffly, not trusting myself to speak. "And," she continued, "I've invited some special guests to join us." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Patricia hurried to answer it, returning moments later with an older couple I didn't recognize. "Jessica, Mark, I'd like you to meet Ron and Elaine Phelps. Ron is the community manager here at Desert Palms, and Elaine runs the social committee." We exchanged awkward handshakes as I tried to figure out what Patricia was up to. "I was just telling Ron and Elaine about how my son and daughter-in-law purchased this lovely home for me as a retirement gift," Patricia continued, beaming. "They're such thoughtful children, wanting to make sure I was settled in a nice community." I froze. Mark's eyes widened in alarm. "That's so wonderful," Elaine gushed. "Family taking care of family. That's what it's all about." "Mom, that's not," Mark began, but Patricia smoothly interrupted. "They insisted I keep my condo too, but honestly, after staying here for just a few days, I'm ready to sell it. Desert Palms is exactly where I belong." Ron nodded approvingly. "We're certainly happy to have you, Patricia, and it's not often we get younger property owners who understand the value of our community so well," he added, glancing at Mark and me. I felt like I had stepped into some alternate reality where Patricia had not only taken over my investment property, but was now claiming we had given it to her as a gift. "Would anyone like some wine?" Patricia asked cheerfully, already pouring glasses for everyone. The next hour was excruciating. We sat through dinner as Patricia spun an elaborate fiction about how Mark and I had secretly purchased the house months ago, renovated it to almost her taste, and had planned to surprise her on her birthday next month, but accelerated the timeline when her condo flooded. Ron and Elaine ate it up, complimenting us on our generosity and Patricia on her decorating skills. Mark and I exchanged increasingly desperate glances across the table, neither of us wanting to call out his mother's lies in front of strangers, but feeling more trapped by the minute. When the Phelpsies finally left after dessert and coffee, promising to introduce Patricia to everyone worth knowing at the Thursday night community mixer, I turned to my mother-in-law with barely contained fury. "What was that?" I demanded as soon as the door closed behind them. Patricia began collecting dinner plates as if nothing unusual had happened. "What was what, dear?" "You told them we gave you this house as a gift," Mark said, his voice strained. "Why would you do that?" She carried the plates to the kitchen, forcing us to follow. "It makes a better story, don't you think? Much nicer than my son's wife is kicking me out in 2 months to rent to strangers." "That's not fair," I said. "This was always meant to be a rental property. You knew that." Patricia loaded the dishwasher with deliberate care. "What I know is that my only son has done very well for himself, while his mother lives in a cramped condo with plumbing problems. What I know is that this house is sitting empty while I'm facing thousands in repair costs and displacement. What I know is that family should take care of family." Mark ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, we're happy to help you temporarily, but Jess's rental plans for this property are important to her business." "Business," Patricia scoffed. "Playing with houses isn't a business, Mark. It's a hobby that you subsidize." Something inside me snapped. Years of snide comments, backhanded compliments, and thinly veiled contempt came rushing to the surface. "You have no idea what you're talking about," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You've never bothered to learn anything about me or what I do." Patricia turned to face me, arms crossed. "I know enough. I know my son works hard as an architect while you flip houses and play real estate agent, probably losing more money than you make." Mark stepped forward. "Mom, stop. That's completely untrue." But I held up a hand to stop him. It was time Patricia learned exactly who she was dealing with. "Do you want to know something interesting about Desert Palms, Patricia?" I asked, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. "The entire community is owned by Horizon Living Communities. And do you know who sits on the board of Horizon Living?" She frowned, clearly not following my point. "I do," I said simply. "In fact, I was part of the investment group that acquired Desert Palms 3 years ago." "I don't just own this house, Patricia. I partly own the entire community you're so eager to join." Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly. I continued, warming to my subject. "And that condo you live in? The one with the plumbing problems? I know the building manager personally because my firm manages 2 other properties in that same complex. So when you lie to the community manager, hear about me giving you this house. It doesn't just make you look foolish. It makes you look foolish to people I work with professionally." Patricia's face had gone pale, but I wasn't finished. I came into my marriage with Mark with my own money, my own investments, and my own thriving business. I don't need him to subsidize anything. In fact, my income has exceeded his for the past 3 years. Not that it matters because we're partners in every sense of the word. Mark placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that meant everything in that moment. "So here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You can stay here for 2 months as originally discussed, provided you make no further changes to the property. You will cancel any workers you've scheduled, and you will stop telling people that we gave you this house. At the end of 2 months, when your condo is repaired, you will return to it, and I will proceed with my rental plans for this property. Are we clear?" Patricia looked to Mark, clearly expecting him to contradict me or soften my stance. Instead, he nodded firmly. "Jess, is being more than generous, Mom. 2 months, no more renovations, no more lies about ownership. Patricia's shoulders slumped slightly, the fight seeming to drain out of her. I was only trying to make a comfortable home for myself. No, I corrected her. You were trying to stake a claim on something that isn't yours. There's a difference. She turned away, busying herself with wiping down the kitchen counter. Fine, 2 months, no changes. As we drove home that evening, the car was filled with a tense silence that eventually gave way to Mark's quiet apology. I had no idea she would go that far, he said, telling people we gave her the house. That's a new level even for her. I stared out the window at the passing streetlights. She's never respected me or my career. She's never even tried to understand what I do. I know, he acknowledged. And I should have done more to correct her assumptions over the years. I turned to look at him. Why didn't you? He considered this for a moment. I guess I always thought she'd eventually see for herself how capable and successful you are. That she'd come around on her own. Some people don't want to see what's right in front of them, I said. Especially when it contradicts what they've already decided to believe. Mark reached over and squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, watching you stand up to her tonight was incredibly impressive. You were magnificent. Despite everything, I smiled. It felt good to finally set the record straight. So what happens now? He asked. I leaned back in my seat, suddenly exhausted from the emotional confrontation. Now we hold her to the 2-month timeline, and when she moves out, we undo all her improvements and get the property back on track. And our relationship with her? I sighed. That's up to her, really. I'm done trying to earn the approval of someone who's determined. Not to give it, but she's your mother and I'll be civil for your sake. Mark nodded, understanding the boundary I was drawing. That's fair. The next 2 months were a study in civil detente. Patricia kept her word about not making further changes to the property, though she made no effort to undo the changes she'd already made. Mark checked in on her regularly, but I limited my interactions to necessary communications about the house. Toward the end of the 2 months, I received an unexpected call from Ron Phelps, the Desert Palms community manager. Jessica, I hope I'm not overstepping, he began after exchanging pleasantries. But I wanted to apologize for any awkwardness at that dinner at your property. Patricia subsequently clarified that the house is actually your investment property, and not a gift to her. I was surprised by his call, but appreciated his directness. Thank you, Ron. I appreciate that. I've worked with Horizon Living long enough to know who the key players are, he continued. When Patricia mentioned your name, I should have made the connection immediately. It's fine, I assured him. Family dynamics can be complicated. He chuckled. Indeed they can. Anyway, Patricia seems to have really fallen in love with Desert Palms. She's become quite active in the community these past weeks. I'm glad she's enjoying it, I said cautiously, wondering where this conversation was headed. Actually, that's partly why I'm calling. There's a smaller unit coming available next month, a 2-bedroom cottage in the east section. Given your connection to Horizon, I thought you might want to know about it before it's listed publicly. I sat up straighter in my chair. That is interesting. It would be perfect for someone like Patricia, he continued. Lower maintenance than her current condo, but still within the community she's come to love. By the time I hung up, the beginnings of a plan had formed in my mind. That evening, I discussed it with Mark. You want to buy another property at Desert Palms for my mother? He asked, clearly surprised. Not for her, I clarified, as another investment. But we could offer her first right of refusal as a tenant, at market rate, of course. Hi, he studied me thoughtfully. Why would you do that after everything she's put you through? I considered the question carefully. Partly because it makes good business sense. The units in Desert Palms have excellent rental potential and strong appreciation. but also because I think your mother needs to understand that respecting boundaries doesn't mean I don't care about her well-being." Mark pulled me into a hug. "You continue to amaze me, Jess Morgan." 2 days before Patricia was scheduled to move back to her repaired condo, I asked Mark to bring her to our house for dinner. I prepared her favorite meal, pot roast with all the trimmings, and set the table with our best dishes. When she arrived, Patricia seemed subdued, almost resigned. I imagined she was dreading returning to her condo after experiencing the more spacious saguaro property and the Desert Palms community. Over dinner, I broached the subject. "Patricia, I understand you've become quite involved at Desert Palms." She nodded, a wistful expression crossing her face. "It's a lovely community. Much nicer than where my condo is located. As it happens," I continued casually, "I've been notified about another property becoming available there next month. A 2-bedroom cottage that might be perfect for a single occupant." Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Oh? I'm considering acquiring it as another investment property," I explained. "And if I do, I'd be looking for a reliable tenant, someone who would respect the property while making it their home." Patricia set down her fork, her eyes narrowing slightly as she tried to determine if there was a catch. "And you're telling me this because I thought you might be interested in renting it," I said simply. "At market rate, of course, but you would have first option before I list it publicly." Mark watched the exchange with barely concealed amusement. "You would? Rent to me? After everything?" Patricia asked, clearly confused by the offer. I met her gaze steadily. "Business is business, Patricia. You've proven you can be respectful of property boundaries when properly motivated. And finding good tenants can be challenging." She seemed to be struggling with several competing emotions. "This isn't charity?" she asked finally. "Absolutely not," I assured her. "It would be a standard landlord-tenant relationship, with a proper lease and clear expectations on both sides. The only special consideration is giving you first option on the property." She was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "Why would you do this?" I glanced at Mark, who gave me an encouraging nod. "Because despite our differences, you're family," I said. "And while I won't allow you to disrespect me or my career or my property, I also won't ignore an opportunity that could benefit both of us." The tension in Patricia's shoulders seemed to ease slightly. "I would like to see this cottage before making any decisions." "Of course," I agreed. "I'll set up a viewing next week." As the meal continued, I noticed something different in Patricia's demeanor. Not warmth exactly, but perhaps the beginnings of respect. She asked several surprisingly thoughtful questions about how I evaluated investment properties and what factors I considered when matching tenants to specific units. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed to be seeing me, really, seeing me, as a professional with expertise in my field. 1 week after our dinner conversation, I took Patricia to see the cottage at Desert Palms. The property was smaller than the saguaro house, but had its own charm. A cozy 2-bedroom with patio, a generous covered patio that overlooked one of the community's many small parks. As we walked through, I could see Patricia mentally arranging furniture and planning color schemes, though she tried to maintain a neutral expression. "The kitchen is a bit outdated," she commented, running her finger along the laminate countertop. "It is," I agreed. "If I purchase the property, I'd likely update it before putting it on the rental market. New countertops, cabinet refacing, modern appliances." She nodded thoughtfully. "The location is excellent. Walking distance to the community center. And the monthly HOA fees cover all the amenities: pool, fitness center, landscaping maintenance," I added. We completed the tour and sat on a bench in the nearby park to discuss the details. The early spring sun felt warm on my face as I outlined what the rental arrangement would look like if I decided to move forward with the purchase. "Market rate is $1,850 per month," I explained. "That's non-negotiable, I'd require a standard security deposit and first month's rent up front, just as I would with any tenant. Patricia frowned slightly. That's more than I'm paying for my condo. It is, I acknowledged, but it includes amenities your condo doesn't have, and it's in a more desirable community. It's actually below market value for comparable properties in this area. She seemed to be calculating something in her head. I suppose I could make it work, especially if I sell the condo instead of keeping it. I raised an eyebrow. You're considering selling? Well, after the flood issues, I'm not eager to go back, and maintenance on a condo that's over 20 years old can be substantial. It might be time for a fresh start. She hesitated, then added, At my age, it makes sense to be in a community like this one. The services, the social activities, the security. I nodded, understanding the appeal for someone in her position. Let me be clear, Patricia. I haven't decided to purchase this property yet. I need to run the numbers, consider other investment opportunities, and make sure it fits into my portfolio strategy. Of course, she said quickly. I understand this is a business decision for you. This seemed like a step forward, her acknowledging that my real estate activities were actual business decisions, not just a hobby. Maybe our confrontation had finally broken through some of her preconceptions. I'll let you know what I decide within the next week, I promised as we walked back to my car. Thank you for considering me as a potential tenant, she said, the words sounding slightly stiff, as if she wasn't accustomed to expressing gratitude to me. Regardless of what you decide, I appreciate the opportunity. It wasn't quite an apology for her previous behavior, but it was something. A small acknowledgement that perhaps she had misjudged me. The next day, I met with Dave Chen, my financial advisor, to discuss the potential investment. Dave had been helping me manage my property portfolio for the past 5 years and understood my investment strategy well. Desert Palms is a solid community, he commented, reviewing the details of the cottage. And we've seen consistent appreciation in that area over the past decade. The numbers look good, I agreed. But I'm concerned about some potential complications. Dave looked up from his tablet. What kind of complications? I explained the situation with Patricia, her unauthorized redecoration of the saguaro property, her initial dismissiveness of my career, and now the possibility of her becoming my tenant. Mixing family and business can be tricky, Dave acknowledged, especially when there's already tension in the relationship. That's putting it mildly, I said. But something changed after our confrontation. She seems to be seeing me differently now. People often respect strength and clear boundaries, Dave observed. Standing up to her might have forced her to reevaluate her assumptions about you. I nodded, having considered this myself. Still, I'm hesitant to become her landlord. If things go south, it could create serious problems for Mark. What does he think about it? He's supportive of whatever I decide, but I know he's hoping it might help improve my relationship with his mother. Dave leaned back in his chair, considering. From a purely financial standpoint, the cottage is a good investment regardless of who the tenant is. The question is whether the potential personal complications outweigh the business benefits. I left Dave's office with more to think about. On paper, the investment made sense, but relationships couldn't be evaluated on a spreadsheet, and Patricia had already proven herself capable of boundary violations when it suited her. That evening, I was working late in my home office when an email notification appeared on my screen. The sender was Patricia, and the subject line read simply, "Thank you." Curious, I opened it. "Jessica, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to show me the cottage today. It's a lovely property in a wonderful community, and I appreciate being considered as a potential tenant. I also owe you an apology. My behavior regarding the saguaro house was inappropriate. I should not have redecorated without permission or made assumptions about your gift-giving intentions. More importantly, I should not have dismissed your career, accomplishments over the years. Mark has always spoken highly of your business acumen, but I admit I was skeptical. I come from a generation where women weren't typically involved in real estate investment, and I incorrectly assumed my son was simply being supportive of a hobby. Seeing you in your professional element today, confidently discussing investment strategies and market evaluations, was enlightening. I realize now that I've been unfair in my assessment of your career, and for that, I am truly sorry. Regardless of your decision about the cottage, I hope we might find a way forward with better understanding between us. Patricia. I read the email. Twice. Almost unable to believe that these words had come from the same woman who had dismissively called my career a hobby just weeks before. The apology seemed genuine, if long overdue. I forwarded the email to Mark with a simple question. Does this sound like your mother? His response came a few minutes later. I'm as shocked as you are. I've never known her to admit she was wrong about anything. Maybe your standing up to her had more impact than we realized. I sat back in my chair, contemplating what this might mean. Could people really change their deep-seated attitudes so quickly? Or was this just Patricia being strategic, knowing that my goodwill could determine her housing situation? I decided to sleep on it before responding, not wanting to make a decision based on emotional reaction rather than careful consideration. The next morning, I was at my office reviewing proposals for a commercial property renovation when my assistant buzzed to let me know I had an unexpected visitor, Patricia. Send her in, I said, curious about this unscheduled appearance. Patricia entered, looking slightly nervous, an expression I'd never associated with my normally confident mother-in-law. She was carrying a large folder and a small gift bag. Jessica, thank you for seeing me without an appointment, she began, taking the seat I offered opposite my desk. I know you're busy. What can I do for you, Patricia? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She placed the folder on my desk and slid it toward me. I wanted to bring you some information that might be relevant to your decision about the cottage. I opened the folder to find a meticulously organized set of documents. Her credit report, bank statements, proof of income from her pension and investments, references from previous landlords, and even a property condition report from her condo, showing her history of maintenance and care. I thought you might want to evaluate me as you would any other potential tenant, she explained. I know trust needs to be earned, especially after my behavior at the Saguaro house. I was impressed despite myself. This was the kind of comprehensive application package I would expect from an ideal tenant, not something thrown together as an afterthought. This is very thorough, I acknowledged. I asked Mark what kind of documentation you typically require from tenants, she admitted. I wanted to make sure I provided everything you might need to make an informed decision. The effort she had put into this was telling. Either she really wanted the cottage, or she was genuinely trying to demonstrate respect for my business processes. Perhaps both. I appreciate this, Patricia. I'll review it along with my other considerations about the property. She nodded, then reached for the small gift bag she had brought. This isn't a bribe, she said with a small smile, the first genuine one I could remember her directing at me. Just a peace offering. I accepted the bag and looked inside to find a small, elegantly wrapped box. Opening it, I discovered a business card holder made of polished rosewood with silver trim. It was beautiful and tasteful, clearly chosen with care. I noticed you keep your cards in that plastic holder, Patricia explained. This seemed more fitting for someone of your professional stature. The gift was thoughtful in a way I wouldn't have expected from her, acknowledging my professional identity rather than trying to mold me into something more conventional. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. It's lovely. Patricia seemed relieved by my reaction. I should let you get back to work. I just wanted to drop these off in person. As she stood to leave, I made a split-second decision. Patricia, are you free for lunch tomorrow? I'd like to discuss the cottage situation further. A look of surprise crossed her face, followed by a cautious smile. Yes, I'm free. I'd like that. After she left, I examined the business card holder more closely. It was high quality, the kind of subtle status symbol that spoke of success without being ostentatious. Patricia had better taste than I'd given her credit for, and she had chosen something that respected my professional identity rather than trying to impose her own aesthetic preferences. I called Mark to tell him about his mother's visit. She came to your office with a tenant application package? He sounded as surprised as I had been. And a gift, I added. A really nice business card holder. Wow, he said, clearly struggling to reconcile this behavior with his mother's usual approach. I mean, I helped her compile the list of documents you might want, but the gift was all her idea. I've invited her to lunch tomorrow to discuss the cottage situation further. That's great, Jess. I know this is a lot to process after years of her. Well, being her. But maybe this is a genuine turning point. Maybe, I said, not quite ready to fully embrace that optimism. We'll see how lunch goes. The following day, I met Patricia at Oliveto, a small Italian restaurant near my office. I had deliberately chosen a place associated with my work, life rather than our family dynamics, neutral territory where we could speak as adults with separate identities. Patricia arrived precisely on time, dressed in a tailored pantsuit that spoke of the professional woman she had once been before, retirement. I remembered Mark mentioning that she had worked as a hospital administrator for over 30 years, a career that required considerable business acumen and leadership skills. After we ordered, I decided to be direct. I've reviewed your application. Materials, Patricia. They're impeccable. Thank you, she said, taking a sip of her water. I wanted to demonstrate that I take this seriously, both the potential rental agreement and your profession. I appreciate that, but I have to ask, what? Changed? For years you've dismissed my career and made it clear you don't think much of what I do. Now suddenly you're treating me like a respected professional. Patricia was quiet for a moment, seemingly gathering her thoughts. When you confronted me about the Saguaro house, you mentioned being on the board of Horizon Living Communities. After you left, I looked up the company. This wasn't what I had expected her to say. And I found articles about your role in the acquisition of Desert Palms, press releases with your name as a key investor, business journal profiles describing your investment strategy. She shook her head slightly. All this time, I assumed you were just playing at business, but you're actually significant in your field. There was a note of genuine surprise in her voice that might have been offensive if it weren't so honest. That must have been quite a revelation, I said, trying to keep the sarcasm from my tone. It was, she admitted, either missing or ignoring my edge. But it was also humbling. I realized I had made assumptions about you based on, well, outdated notions about young women and careers. I never bothered to actually learn about what you do. Our salads arrived, giving me a moment to process her words. There seemed to be a genuine recognition of her error, though it had taken external validation of my success to trigger it. I built my business from the ground up, I said after the server left. I started with a single condo I purchased out of college, leveraged that equity into a second property, and kept building. By the time I met Mark, I had a portfolio of 6 properties and was already part of 2 investment groups. Patricia nodded, listening with what appeared to be genuine interest. Mark tried to tell me some of this when you first got engaged, but She hesitated. You didn't believe him, I finished for her. I thought he was exaggerating to justify marrying someone who seemed to me unsuitable. She had the grace to look embarrassed by this admission. I was wrong, and I've been wrong for years. About you, about your career, about what you bring to my son's life. I took a bite of my salad, considering how to respond. On one hand, it was gratifying to finally hear her acknowledge her misjudgment. On the other, It was frustrating that it had taken discovering my professional status for her to see me as worthy of respect. Patricia, while I appreciate your newfound recognition of my career, what bothers me most isn't that you dismissed my professional accomplishments. It's that you felt entitled to do so while simultaneously dismissing my boundaries and autonomy. She looked down at her plate. You're right. The way I behaved at the Saguaro house was inexcusable. I convinced myself I was just making improvements, but the truth is, I was asserting control in a situation where I felt I had none. This level of self-awareness surprised me. What do you mean by that? Patricia sighed. When my condo flooded, it was frightening. Not just the damage, but the reminder that I'm getting older, that unexpected disasters can upend my carefully structured life. Moving into your property gave me a sense of control I desperately needed, and I took it too far. For the first time, I found myself truly empathizing with Patricia's position. The loss of control that comes with aging and unexpected setbacks was something I could understand, even if I didn't condone her response to it. That helps me understand your actions better, I said. But it doesn't change the fact that boundaries and mutual respect are essential if we're going to have any kind of relationship moving forward, especially if that relationship includes a landlord-tenant component. I know, she said quietly, and I'm committed to demonstrating that I can respect those boundaries. The cottage at Desert Palms represents a fresh start for me in many ways. Not just a new home, but a new chapter where I can be more thoughtful about how I interact with you and Mark. I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulation or passive aggression I'd come to expect from her. Instead, I saw something I rarely associated with Patricia: vulnerability. I've decided to purchase the cottage, I said finally. The investment makes sense financially, regardless of who the tenant is, but I need absolute clarity on the terms if you're going to rent it. Patricia straightened in her chair, her expression one of cautious hope. What terms did you have in mind? First, standard market rent with annual increases as outlined in the lease. No family discounts, no exceptions. She nodded. That's fair. Second, any modifications to the property, even something as minor as changing cabinet hardware, must be approved in writing by me as the landlord. No surprises, no redecorating without permission. Understood, she agreed. Third, our business relationship as landlord and tenant remains separate from our family relationship. Issues with the property come through my property management channels, not through Mark or family dinners. That makes sense, Patricia said. Professional boundaries. And finally, I continued, we both commit to making a genuine effort to build a more respectful relationship, regardless of the business arrangement. That means no more dismissive comments about my career, no more undermining me to Mark, and no more passive-aggressive behavior at family gatherings. Patricia was quiet for a moment, then extended her hand across the table. Those terms are acceptable, all of them. I shook her hand, sealing our agreement with a formality that felt appropriate for this turning point. Then we have a deal. I'll have the contract drawn up next week after the purchase closes. As we finished our lunch, the conversation shifted to more neutral topics: the amenities at Desert Palms, the timeline for the cottage purchase, the kinds of updates I was considering for the kitchen. It wasn't warm or intimate, but it was civil and productive, a significant improvement over our previous interactions. When we parted outside the restaurant, Patricia surprised me with one last comment. Jessica, I want you to know something. I've been difficult, more than difficult, because I've been afraid. Afraid of what? I asked. Of becoming irrelevant in my son's life. Of being replaced by a woman who seemed so different from what I imagined for him. She shook her head slightly. It was never really about you. It was about my own insecurities. The admission couldn't have been easy for someone as proud as Patricia. Mark has room in his life for both of us, I said. He always has. I'm beginning to see that, she replied. Thank you for lunch, and for the second chance. As I watched her walk to her car, I felt cautiously optimistic. People could change when they were truly motivated to do so, and Patricia seemed motivated. Whether that change would last beyond her immediate housing needs remained to be seen, but it was a start. Back at my office, I called the real estate agent handling the cottage and made a formal offer. Slightly below asking price, but with a quick closing timeline that would be attractive to the seller. Then I messaged Mark. Lunch. Went well. Made an offer on the cottage. Your mother might actually become my tenant. His reply came quickly. Miracles do happen. Coming home early tonight. Let's celebrate. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved quickly. My offer on the cottage was accepted, and I closed on the property 3 days earlier than expected. I immediately arranged for the kitchen updates I had planned. New quartz countertops to replace the laminate, cabinet refacing, and modern stainless steel appliances. I also had the bathrooms updated with new fixtures and tile work, and fresh paint throughout in a neutral palette that would allow Patricia to add her own touches without clashing with the backdrop. The renovation work proceeded smoothly, and I made a point of consulting Patricia on certain design decisions, not because I needed her approval, but because it seemed like a practical way to reinforce our new dynamic. I would present her with 2 or 3 options I had already determined were acceptable and let her choose between them. It gave her a sense of involvement without ceding control of the investment decisions. I prefer the Carrara look quartz. For the kitchen, she said during one such consultation at the partially renovated cottage. It's more timeless than the darker option. I nodded in agreement. That's my preference as well. It brightens the space, and it's versatile enough to work with almost any decor choices you might make. Patricia seemed pleased to have her opinion validated. The updates you're making are quite tasteful. I appreciate that you're consulting me, even though you don't have to. You're going to be living here, I pointed out. It makes sense to consider your preferences within the parameters of what works for the property value. She smiled slightly. A pragmatic approach. I can respect that. The renovations were completed a week before Patricia's condo repairs were finished, giving me time for a thorough cleaning and final inspection before her move-in date. I had my property manager prepare a standard lease agreement, with an additional addendum specifically addressing the modification restrictions we had discussed. The day before the scheduled signing, Patricia called me directly, something she rarely did, preferring to go through Mark when she wanted to communicate with me. Jessica, I've been thinking about our arrangement, she began, and I felt a momentary surge of concern that she was about to back out or try to renegotiate our terms. Yes? I prompted when she paused. I'd like to add something to our agreement, if you're amenable. I chose my words carefully. What did you have in mind? A first right of refusal to purchase the cottage if you ever decide to sell it, she said. At market value, of course. I can see myself wanting to stay there long term, and it would give me peace of mind to know I might have the opportunity to buy it someday. The request surprised me, but it wasn't unreasonable. I can include that provision, I agreed, with the understanding that there's no guarantee I'll sell anytime soon, if ever. Of course, she said quickly. I understand it's an investment for you. I'm just thinking long term. I'll have my attorney add the clause to our agreement. Thank you, Jessica. There was a pause, then. I do appreciate everything you've done to make this work. Coming from Patricia, this level of expressed gratitude was unprecedented. You're welcome. I'll see you tomorrow for the signing. After we hung up, I sat at my desk contemplating this latest development. Patricia was thinking of the cottage as a permanent home, not just a temporary solution until she found something else or decided to move back to her condo. This suggested a level of commitment to our new arrangement that was encouraging. The following afternoon, Patricia arrived at my office precisely at the scheduled time for the lease signing. She was dressed formally, as if for an important business meeting, which struck me as another small acknowledgement of the professional nature of our new relationship. My property manager, Alicia, walked us through the lease terms, highlighting the specific clauses about property modifications and the newly added right of first refusal in case of sale. Patricia listened attentively, asking clarifying questions that demonstrated she was taking the agreement seriously. When it came time to sign, Patricia paused, pen hovering above the paper. "I want to make sure we're both entering this with clear expectations," she said, looking directly at me. "This is a business arrangement between us, but it's also an opportunity to establish a healthier relationship overall. I'm committed to respecting the boundaries we've discussed, both as your tenant and as your mother-in-law." I appreciated the directness of her statement. "I'm committed to making this work as well, Patricia, on both levels." She nodded and signed the lease, then handed me a check for the security deposit and first month's rent. The transaction was complete, the relationship transformed. My difficult mother-in-law was now officially my tenant. As we walked out of the office together, Patricia turned to me with an expression I hadn't seen before, something close to admiration. "You know, in another life, we might have been colleagues rather than in-laws," she said thoughtfully. "I think I would have respected you as a professional from the beginning if we had met that way." It was an interesting observation, one that highlighted how family dynamics often complicated relationships that might otherwise be straightforward. "Maybe," I acknowledged. "But we're here now, finding our way forward." Patricia nodded. Better late than never, I suppose. We had reached the parking lot, the afternoon sun warm on our faces despite the spring breeze. "The keys will be available for pickup tomorrow morning," I told her. "The cottage is ready whenever you are." "Thank you, Jessica, for everything." She hesitated, then added, "Mark is lucky to have you. I'm beginning to see that more clearly now." As I watched her drive away, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past few months. What had begun as an unauthorized invasion of my property had evolved into something I never could have anticipated. A reset of a difficult relationship, a new understanding between two strong-willed women who had more in common than either had been willing to acknowledge. Whether this change would endure remained to be seen. Trust, once broken, took time to rebuild. But for the first time since I'd met Patricia, I felt cautiously optimistic about our future, both as landlord and tenant, and as family. 2 weeks after Patricia moved into the cottage, I received an unexpected email from Ron Phelps, the Desert Palms community manager. The subject line read, "Concern regarding tenant activities." My stomach tightened as I clicked to open it, immediately wondering if Patricia had already started making unauthorized changes to the property. "Dear Ms. Morgan," the email began formally, "I hope this message finds you well. I'm writing to address several inquiries about Patricia Richardson's status within our community. It has come to my attention that she has been introducing herself as an owner rather than a tenant of the Cypress Lane cottage, which conflicts with our records. Additionally, she has submitted an application to join our architectural review committee, a position reserved exclusively for property owners." I read the email twice, a familiar sense of frustration building. Just when I thought Patricia and I had reached an understanding, she was already blurring the lines of our agreement. I forwarded the email to Mark with a brief note. "Your mother is at it again. Call me when you can." Mark called within minutes. "What's going on?" I explained the situation, trying to keep my tone measured despite my disappointment. "She's telling people she owns the cottage, Mark, after everything we discussed." He sighed heavily. "I don't understand why she would do that. She seemed genuinely committed to your agreement." "That's what I thought too," I replied, drumming my fingers on my desk. "I need to address this directly before it becomes a bigger issue." Do you want me to talk to her first? Mark offered. I considered this for a moment. No, I think it's better if I handle it myself. This is exactly the kind of situation covered by our agreement, keeping business and family separate. If you step in, it blurs those lines even further. You're right, he conceded. Just maybe give her a chance to explain? She might have a reason, or there could be a misunderstanding. I promised to keep an open mind, then called Ron to get more details before confronting Patricia. He confirmed that she had been quite explicit about being the owner in several community gatherings, even discussing future renovation plans she intended to implement. The Architectural Review Committee position was particularly concerning, Ron explained. She submitted a detailed application highlighting her investment in the community as a property owner. We only discovered the discrepancy when processing the application. After thanking Ron for the information, I sat at my desk contemplating how to proceed. Part of me was disappointed, but not entirely surprised. Old habits died hard, and Patricia had a long history of overstepping boundaries. Still, I had hoped our new arrangement would mark a genuine turning point. Instead of calling Patricia immediately while still frustrated, I decided to visit the cottage in person the following day. This conversation needed to happen face-to-face, where I could better gauge her reactions and explanations. That evening, I discussed the situation with Mark over dinner, careful to present the facts without letting my irritation dominate. I don't understand why she would risk the progress you two have made, Mark said, looking troubled. The lease? Terms were very clear. People revert to familiar patterns when they're in new situations, I suggested, trying to be fair. Maybe she's embarrassed about being a tenant rather than an owner. Status seems important to her. Mark nodded thoughtfully. It is. She's always been conscious of appearances. My dad was the same way. They both came from humble beginnings and worked hard to achieve a certain lifestyle and recognition. This context helped me understand Patricia's behavior a bit better, even if it didn't excuse it. I'll talk to her tomorrow. Clear, direct communication seems to work best with her. The next morning, I arrived at the cottage around 10 a.m., a time I knew Patricia would likely be home based on her usual schedule. The exterior looked exactly as it had when she moved in, which was a positive sign. At least she hadn't started making changes to the outside of the property yet. Patricia answered the door looking surprised, but not displeased to see me. She was dressed for the day in casual but elegant clothes, her silver hair styled perfectly. Jessica, what a nice surprise. Come in. Come in. I just made some coffee. I followed her into the kitchen, noting that the interior also appeared unchanged. From the renovations I had completed, the Carrara-look quartz countertops gleamed in the morning light, and everything was meticulously organized. Whatever her faults, Patricia was not a messy tenant. Would you like a cup? She offered, already reaching for a second mug. Sure. Thank you. I accepted the coffee and took a seat at the small kitchen island. The place looks good. Are you settling in well? Patricia beamed. Oh, wonderfully. The community is everything I hoped it would be. I've joined 3 activity groups already: book club, water aerobics, and the garden society. Everyone has been so welcoming. I nodded, taking a sip of coffee while gathering my thoughts. I'm glad to hear that, but there seems to be some confusion about your status here that we need to address. Her smile faltered slightly. What do you mean? Ron Phelps contacted me yesterday, I said, keeping my tone neutral. He mentioned that you've been introducing yourself as the owner of this property, not a tenant, and that you applied for a position on the Architectural Review Committee, which is only open to property owners. Patricia's cheeks flushed slightly, but she recovered quickly. Oh, that. There's been a misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? I asked, maintaining eye contact. She set her coffee cup down carefully. Well, When I first met people here, I may have been a bit ambiguous about my situation, and they simply assumed I was an owner. It seemed awkward to correct them after a while. And the committee application? Patricia had the grace to look embarrassed. That was perhaps overreaching. I should have consulted you first. It's just that I have considerable experience with architectural aesthetics, and I thought I could contribute meaningfully to the community. I took another sip of coffee, considering her explanation. There was a partial admission there, but also considerable rationalization. Patricia, our agreement was very clear. This is a landlord-tenant relationship. You're not the owner of this property, and representing yourself as such creates problems for both of us, legally and within the community. I understand, but surely it's a minor issue, she countered. What real harm does it do if people think I own rather than rent? It matters because honesty matters, I replied firmly. It matters because you submitted an official application with false information. And it matters because it violates the trust we were trying to build. Patricia's expression tightened, a glimpse of the defensive woman I was more familiar with showing through her new, more accommodating persona. I think you're making too much of this, Jessica. It's a small social fiction, not a criminal offense. It's not about the severity, I explained, maintaining my calm. It's about the pattern. We agreed to start fresh with clear boundaries and mutual respect. Misrepresenting your status here undermines that agreement. She was quiet for a moment, fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. I suppose I didn't think of it that way. It just felt diminishing somehow, to admit I'm renting at my age, as if I hadn't achieved enough to own my own home. This vulnerability surprised me. There's no shame in renting, Patricia. Many people choose to rent for flexibility, convenience, or to free up capital for other investments. It's not a reflection of your success or status. Perhaps that's how your generation sees it, she said with a small sigh. For mine, ownership was the ultimate marker of stability and accomplishment. I could see this was about more than just appearances. It was tied to deeper issues of identity and self-worth for Patricia. While that didn't excuse her behavior, it helped me approach the situation with more empathy. I understand this might be challenging for you, I acknowledged. But going forward, I need your commitment to be honest about your status here. If it helps, you could say you're living in a property managed by your daughter-in-law's company. That's entirely truthful while maintaining your connection to the property. Patricia seemed to consider this suggestion. That does sound better than just tenant. It acknowledges our family relationship while being honest. Exactly, I agreed. And as for the Architectural Review Committee, that's unfortunately not possible as a tenant. But there are plenty of other committees and groups open to all residents that would benefit from your experience. She nodded slowly. The Social Activities Committee has been looking for new members. They organize all the community events and outings. That sounds perfect for you, I encouraged. Your organizational skills would be a real asset there. The tension in Patricia's shoulders eased slightly. You're handling this very professionally, Jessica. I expected more anger, to be honest. Would anger be productive? I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. No, she admitted, but it would be understandable. I did violate our agreement, even if I didn't see it that way at the time. This level of self-awareness was new from Patricia, and I found it encouraging despite the situation that had prompted it. I'm not interested in conflicts that don't serve a purpose, I explained. I just want our arrangement to work, which means addressing issues directly when they arise. Patricia studied me with newfound consideration. You know, that's exactly how I approached my administrative work at the hospital. Problems were inevitable, but how we handled them determined whether they became disasters or opportunities for improvement. Exactly, I agreed, surprised and pleased by this moment of connection. So, will you speak with Ron and clarify your status? She straightened her shoulders. Yes, I'll call him today and explain the confusion. And I'll withdraw my application to the Architectural Review Committee. Thank you, I said, finishing my coffee. I appreciate your understanding. As I prepared to leave, Patricia walked me to the door. Jessica, before you go, I want to apologize. Not just for this misunderstanding, but for my pattern of, pushing boundaries. It's a habit I need to break if we're going to have a better relationship. The admission seemed genuine, which was significant progress from where we'd been just months ago. Recognizing the pattern is the first step, I said. Thank you for being open to that. After leaving Patricia's cottage, I drove directly to my office, feeling cautiously optimistic about our conversation. While I was disappointed that the issue had arisen at all, her response to being confronted suggested real growth. She had acknowledged her mistake without excessive defensiveness and seemed to genuinely understand why her actions were problematic. Later that afternoon, I received an email from Ron Phelps confirming that Patricia had called to clarify her status and withdraw her committee application. She was quite gracious about the whole thing, Ron wrote. Even suggested she might be better suited to the Social Activities Committee, where she's already volunteering to help organize the summer concert series. I forwarded the email to Mark with a brief message. Productive conversation with your mother this morning. Situation resolved. His relief was evident in his reply. Thank you for handling it so well. Dinner out tonight to celebrate the small victory? That evening over dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant, I recounted the conversation with Patricia in more detail. The most surprising part was her actual self-awareness at the end. I told Mark as we shared a tiramisu for dessert. She recognized her pattern of pushing boundaries without me having to spell it out for her. Mark looked thoughtful. My father's death hit her harder than she ever admitted. He was the one person who could always rein her in when she overstepped. Since he's been gone, she's struggled with those boundaries. That makes sense, I acknowledged. Without that check in her life, old habits probably intensified. And she's not used to being challenged, Mark added. Most people just accommodate her to avoid conflict, which only reinforces the behavior. I smiled slightly. Well, I'm not most people. No, you're certainly not, he agreed with a fond expression. And I think that's exactly what she needed. Someone who respects herself enough to set clear boundaries without turning it into a power struggle. The next few weeks passed without incident. Patricia seemed to be genuinely embracing her role in the community while respecting the terms of our agreement. Mark reported that his phone conversations with her included multiple positive comments about the cottage and the renovations I had completed, a far cry from her usual critical perspective. 1 month after our clarification conversation, I received another email from Ron Phelps. Given our previous exchange, I opened it with some trepidation, but its contents surprised me. Dear Jessica, I wanted to let you know that Patricia has become an incredible asset to our community in a very short time. Her work on the Social Activities Committee has already resulted in our most successful summer concert series planning to date. She has a remarkable talent for organization and bringing people together. Whatever you said to her during your conversation, last month seems to have channeled her considerable energy in a very positive direction. The board has asked me to express their appreciation for bringing such an engaged resident into our community. I forwarded the email to Mark, adding, Your mother seems to be thriving at Desert Palms. Not surprised, he replied. She's always been good at bringing people together when she wants to be. Remember how she organized that charity fundraiser for the hospital last year? When she has a positive outlet for her organizational talents, she's a force for good. This perspective on Patricia was so different from my previous experience with her that it gave me pause. Had I been seeing only one dimension of a complex woman? Or was this truly new behavior, prompted by our recent conversations and changing dynamic? A week later, I received a formal invitation in the mail, a beautifully designed card inviting Mark and me to the Desert Palms Summer Concert Series opening night gala. A handwritten note from Patricia was included. As a committee member, I received 2 complimentary tickets to the opening night. I'd be honored if you and Mark would attend as my guests. The cottage has become a true home, and I'd like to share a bit of my new community with you both. The gesture touched me unexpectedly. This wasn't Patricia attempting to overstep or manipulate. It was a genuine invitation to share something she was proud of, extended with respect for the boundaries we had established. Mark was equally surprised when I showed him the invitation. "This is new," he observed. "She's actually inviting you into her world without trying to control the narrative." We decided to accept, and on the evening of the gala, we arrived at Desert Palms to find the community center transformed. Strings of lights illuminated the garden area. Tables with elegant centerpieces dotted the lawn, and a small stage had been set up for the chamber music quartet that would perform. Patricia greeted us at the entrance, looking elegant in a blue dress that complemented her silver hair. "Jessica, Mark, I'm so glad you could come." Her genuine pleasure at seeing us was evident. "The place looks amazing," I complimented, taking in the transformation. "Did you organize all this?" Patricia smiled modestly. "I chaired the decorating subcommittee. We had a wonderful team of volunteers." As she guided us through the event, introducing us to her new friends and fellow committee members, I observed how differently she presented herself here compared to our previous interactions. There was a quiet confidence in her manner, without the defensive edge I'd grown accustomed to. She spoke about the cottage as the lovely property I'm renting from my daughter-in-law's company, comfortable and honest about the arrangement. When the quartet began to play, Patricia excused herself to help with some organizational details, and Mark and I found seats near the front of the audience. "She seems different here," I remarked quietly as the musicians tuned their instruments. "More at ease with herself." Mark nodded. "I haven't seen her this relaxed and happy in years, not since before my dad got sick." The music began, a beautiful Vivaldi piece that floated through the warm evening air. As I watched Patricia moving efficiently among the guests, ensuring everything ran smoothly, I reflected on the transformation of our relationship over the past few months. From the unauthorized takeover of the saguaro property to this moment of mutual respect and appreciation, it had been an unexpected journey. After the performance during the reception that followed, Patricia introduced us to an elegant older gentleman named Howard, a widower who served on the community's finance committee. "Howard has been incredibly helpful in getting me acclimated to Desert Palms," Patricia explained, a subtle flush coloring her cheeks as she spoke. "He's lived here for over 15 years. Patricia has brought a wonderful new energy to our community," Howard replied, his admiration for her evident. The Social Activities Committee was rather stagnant before she joined. As they continued chatting, Mark leaned close to my ear. "Is my mother blushing? I haven't seen that since. Well, ever." I smiled, watching the easy rapport between Patricia and Howard. "I think she might be." Later, as we prepared to leave, Patricia walked us to our car. "Thank you both for coming. It meant a great deal to have you here." "The event was lovely," I told her sincerely. "You've clearly found your niche here." She nodded, a peaceful expression on her face. "I have, and I owe that opportunity to you, Jessica. Not many daughters-in-law would have given me a second chance after how I behaved at the saguaro house." "Or a third chance," Mark added, with a gentle, teasing tone, referring to the ownership misrepresentation issue. Patricia laughed softly. "Yes, or that. I'm trying to be more mindful now. More intentional about respecting boundaries." "It shows," I acknowledged, "and it's appreciated." As we drove home, Mark reached over to take my hand. "That was surprisingly nice." "It was," I agreed. "Your mother seems genuinely happy at Desert Palms." "And that thing with Howard?" Mark raised an eyebrow suggestively. I laughed. "I definitely sensed something there." Good for her, he said thoughtfully. Dad's been gone for 5 years now. She deserves some companionship. The following week, I had a quarterly meeting with my property manager to review all the properties in my portfolio. When we came to the Cypress Lane cottage, Alicia reported that Patricia had submitted a formal request for a modification, the first since she had moved in. She wants to install a built-in bookcase in the second bedroom, which she's using as a home office, Alicia explained, showing me the detailed proposal Patricia had submitted. She's offered to pay for the installation herself, but understands it would become a permanent fixture of the property. She's even included a mock-up from a designer to show exactly what she has in mind. I reviewed the proposal, impressed by its thoroughness and professionalism. The built-in would actually enhance the property value, and Patricia had followed every protocol outlined in our lease agreement for requesting modifications. Approve it, I decided. This is exactly how the process should work. Alicia looked pleased. I have to say, Ms. Richardson is one of our most meticulous tenants. Her monthly inspection reports are always perfect, and she communicates any issues promptly and clearly. This was high praise coming from Alicia, who managed dozens of properties and had seen every type of tenant behavior imaginable. Later, that day, I called Patricia directly to let her know the bookcase had been approved. "Thank you, Jessica," she said, sounding genuinely pleased. "I've accumulated quite a library over the years, and having proper storage would make the space so much more functional." "The design you submitted is beautiful," I told her. "It's exactly the kind of improvement that adds value to the property while meeting your needs as a tenant." "I'm learning to think of both perspectives," she replied. "What works for me and what makes sense for you as the owner." The subtle acknowledgement of my ownership position wasn't lost on me. It was a small thing, but it represented significant growth in our relationship. "How are things going otherwise?" I asked, genuinely interested in her adjustment to the community. "Wonderfully," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "The Social Activities Committee is planning a fall harvest festival now, and—" She hesitated briefly. "Howard and I have been spending quite a bit of time together. He's a lovely man." "That's great, Patricia," I said warmly. "Mark and I both noticed how well you two seem to get along at the concert series." "Yes, well," she sounded slightly flustered, which was endearing from someone usually so composed. "At our age, there's no point in wasting time with unnecessary formalities. We enjoy each other's company." After we hung up, I sat at my desk reflecting on this latest evolution in our relationship. For the first time since I'd known her, Patricia and I were having normal, pleasant conversations without underlying tension or passive-aggressive subtext. It felt like a genuine breakthrough. That evening, Mark and I discussed the approved bookcase and Patricia's budding relationship with Howard. "You know what's remarkable?" Mark observed as we prepared dinner together. 6 months ago, if she wanted to add something to a property, she would have just done it without asking and expected everyone to appreciate her improvements. Now she's following protocols and considering multiple perspectives. People can change when they have the right motivation, I agreed, chopping vegetables for a salad. Her health crisis, the community, maybe even Howard. They've all given her incentive to reconsider how she interacts with others. "Don't underestimate your role in that," Mark said, pausing his dinner preparations to wrap his arms around me from behind. "You set clear boundaries without making it personal. You gave her a path to dignity even when confronting her behavior." I leaned back against him, appreciating his perspective. "I was just trying to protect my property and my sanity. And, in doing so, you may have helped her find a better version of herself," he murmured, kissing the top of my head. "That's no small thing." 2 weeks later, Patricia invited us to Sunday brunch at the cottage. It was the first time she had hosted us formally since moving in, and I was curious to see how she had personalized the space while respecting our agreement. When we arrived, the cottage looked lovely. Patricia had decorated with tasteful furnishings. That complemented the renovation choices I had made, adding personal touches through artwork and accessories rather than permanent changes. Family photos were displayed prominently, including several of Mark and me that I hadn't realized she even had. Howard was there as well, comfortable in Patricia's space in a way that suggested their relationship had deepened significantly. He greeted us warmly, clearly having heard a great deal about us from Patricia. "Your mother-in-law speaks very highly of you, Jessica," he mentioned as we enjoyed mimosas on the patio. "She tells me you're quite the real estate visionary." I nearly choked on my drink, surprised by this characterization. Patricia had spent years dismissing my career, and now she was praising it to others? "That's very kind of her," I managed, glancing at Patricia, who looked slightly embarrassed but not displeased. "Well, it's true," she said with unexpected forthrightness. "I was wrong about your business acumen for a long time. The renovations you've done here and at the Saguaro property demonstrate excellent taste and market awareness." Mark squeezed my hand under the table, his expression a mix of shock and delight at this unprecedented praise from his mother. As the brunch progressed, I noticed something else remarkable. Patricia was truly listening during conversations, not just waiting for her turn to speak or to redirect the discussion. When I mentioned a challenging situation with a commercial property I was renovating downtown, she asked thoughtful questions about zoning regulations and permit processes. "That reminds me of an issue we faced at the hospital during our West Wing expansion," she offered. "The city's permit office was being particularly difficult about the emergency access routes. We ended up bringing in a former city planner as a consultant to navigate the bureaucracy." "That's actually a great idea," I replied, genuinely impressed by the suggestion. I hadn't thought of hiring a consultant specifically for the permitting process. Patricia looked pleased that her input was valued. Sometimes an insider perspective makes all the difference with bureaucratic hurdles. By the time we left, I felt as though I had glimpsed a version of Patricia I had never seen before. Thoughtful, engaged, and surprisingly supportive. The territorial, controlling woman who had moved into the Saguaro property without permission seemed almost like a different person. "That was unexpected," I said to Mark as we drove home. "Your mother actually complimented my career, specifically, to another person." Mark looked as surprised as I felt. I almost fell off my chair when Howard mentioned that real estate visionary comment. That's high praise from my mother. "Do you think it's genuine?" I asked, still processing the shift. "Or is she just on her best behavior because of Howard?" Mark considered this for a moment. "I think it's a bit of both. Howard clearly values professional accomplishment. He had that whole career at the university. So she wants to present herself well in front of him. But I also think she's had time to observe how successful you really are, and she's finally acknowledging it." I nodded slowly. People generally can't maintain pretenses indefinitely. At some point, their true feelings tend to come through. And I think what we saw today was my mother finally allowing herself to genuinely respect you, Mark concluded, which is something I've been waiting for since the day we met. The realization that Patricia's transformation might be authentic, not just a strategic adaptation to her current circumstances, was profound. It suggested possibilities for our future relationship that I had never seriously considered. Genuine mutual respect, maybe even something approaching friendship. As we pulled into our driveway, I found myself smiling at the unexpected journey we had taken. What had begun as a violation of boundaries had somehow led to a deeper understanding between two strong-willed women who had more in common than either had been willing to acknowledge. "Mark," I said as we walked toward our front door, "I think I might actually be starting to like your mother." He laughed, pulling me close. Now that truly is the most unexpected plot twist of all. 3 months into Patricia's tenancy at the cottage, I received an unexpected call from Howard. His name flashing on my phone screen surprised me, while We had become friendly during Patricia-hosted events. We had never communicated directly without her present. "Jessica, I hope you don't mind me calling you directly," he began, his normally confident voice sounding hesitant. "I have a somewhat delicate situation regarding Patricia that I thought you should know about." My mind immediately ran through worst-case scenarios. Had she started making unauthorized changes to the cottage again? Was she telling people she owned the property once more? "What's going on, Howard?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "It's about her health," he said, and my anxiety immediately shifted gears. "She had a minor episode at our community center yesterday. Dizziness, some confusion. The on-site nurse checked her out and recommended she see her doctor immediately. Is she all right?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "She's stable," Howard assured me. "But she did see her doctor this morning, and they're running tests. The thing is..." He hesitated. "She made me promise not to tell Mark. She doesn't want him to worry." I leaned back in my office chair, processing this information. "But she didn't say anything about telling me?" Howard chuckled softly. "A loophole I'm exploiting, I'm afraid. She's being stubborn about this, but I felt someone in the family should know. Since you're her landlord as well as her daughter-in-law, I thought you might be the appropriate person." His reasoning made sense, but I suspected there was more to it. "Howard, are you concerned about something specific?" There was a pause on the line. "She's downplaying the episode, but I witnessed it. It was frightening, Jessica. She suddenly couldn't remember where she was or what day it was. It only lasted about 2 minutes, but you're worried it might be something serious." I finished for him. "Yes," he admitted. "And knowing Patricia as I'm sure you do, she'll minimize health concerns until they become impossible to ignore." I thanked Howard for reaching out and promised to handle the situation discreetly. After hanging up, I sat at my desk weighing my options. I had promised Patricia to maintain boundaries between our business relationship and family matters, but this transcended both categories. This was about her well-being. I decided to visit the cottage that afternoon, using a scheduled maintenance inspection as my pretext. I notified Patricia through our property management system that I would be conducting a quarterly check of the HVAC system before the summer heat intensified. When I arrived at Desert Palms, I found Patricia in her garden, tending to a row of potted herbs she had installed along the patio edge, a modification I had approved last month. She looked up at the sound of my car, surprise briefly crossing her face before she composed herself. "Jessica, I wasn't expecting you personally for the inspection. I thought you'd send a maintenance technician." "I was in the area for another property matter," I lied smoothly. "So I thought I'd handle this one myself. The HVAC company has been a bit unreliable lately." Patricia nodded, removing her gardening gloves. "Well, come in. Everything's been working perfectly, but you're welcome to check." I followed her inside, noting that she moved carefully, as if uncertain of her balance. The cottage looked immaculate as always, with fresh flowers on the dining table and classical music playing softly in the background. If Howard hadn't called, I would never have suspected anything was amiss. While I made a show of checking the thermostat and air vents, I observed Patricia surreptitiously. There was a slight tremor in her hands as she poured us glasses of iced tea, and she seemed paler than usual beneath her perfectly applied makeup. "How have you been feeling?" I asked casually, accepting the offered drink. "Desert Palms keeping you busy?" "Oh, you know how it is," she said with a dismissive wave. "Always something happening here. The social calendar is quite demanding." I noticed she didn't actually answer my question about her health. "Howard mentioned he's enjoyed having you on the activities committee. Said you've brought new energy to the community." At Howard's name, something flickered across Patricia's face. Concern, perhaps, or suspicion. "Howard talks too much sometimes," she said lightly, but her eyes had narrowed slightly. "He seems to care about you a great deal," I ventured. Patricia sighed, setting down her glass with deliberate care. He called you, didn't he? About yesterday? There was no point in pretending. He was concerned, Patricia. And now that I see you, I am too. You don't look well. For a moment, I thought she might maintain the facade, but then her shoulders slumped slightly. It was nothing serious. A brief dizzy spell. The community nurse made far too much of it. Howard said you saw your doctor this morning. Her lips tightened. As I said, everyone is overreacting. The doctor ordered some routine tests, but I'm certain everything is fine. I sat down at the kitchen island, abandoning any pretense about the inspection. Patricia, if something is wrong with your health, Mark should know. Absolutely not, she said firmly. He tends to catastrophize medical issues, always has, since his father's illness. There's no need to worry him over what is probably just low blood pressure or an inner ear issue. I studied her face, seeing both stubborn determination and genuine concern for her son. What did the doctor actually say? Were they concerned? Patricia hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. They mentioned the possibility of TIAs, transient, ischemic attacks, mini-strokes essentially. But it could also be several other less serious conditions. That's why they're running tests. The admission was more serious than I had expected. When do you get the results? Next week, she replied. By Wednesday at the latest. I considered my next words carefully. I understand not wanting to worry Mark unnecessarily. But if the results indicate something serious, you'll tell him. She nodded reluctantly. Of course, I'm not completely unreasonable, Jessica. And in the meantime, are you supposed to be taking any precautions? Should someone be staying with you? Patricia's expression softened slightly at my concern. The doctor said to avoid driving until we know more, which is why Howard has been playing chauffeur. Otherwise, just rest and normal activities. No gardening on ladders or anything. Foolish. I nodded, relieved that she was at least following medical advice. All right, I won't tell Mark for now. But I'd like you to call me after you get the results, regardless of what they show. You really don't need to involve yourself in my medical issues, Patricia protested. I'm not involving myself as your landlord or even as Mark's wife, I clarified. I'm concerned as someone who cares about your well-being. The words felt strange to say aloud, but I realized they were true. Somewhere during the past few months, my feelings toward Patricia had evolved from frustration and wariness to genuine care. She looked equally surprised by my statement, but didn't reject it. I'll call you after the appointment, she promised, though I still think everyone is making too much of this. As I prepared to leave, having completed a cursory check of the HVAC system to maintain my cover story, Patricia walked me to the door. Jessica, she said hesitantly, thank you for your discretion with Mark, and for coming to check on me, in person, even if it was under the guise of a maintenance inspection. I smiled slightly. You caught that, did you? I may be experiencing some health issues, but I'm not naive, she replied with a hint of her usual sharpness. The HVAC was serviced less than a month ago. Fair enough, I conceded. Just take care of yourself, Patricia, and call me if you need anything before your appointment. On the drive back to my office, I found myself genuinely worried about Patricia's health. The relationship between us had transformed so dramatically over the past months that it was hard to reconcile my current concern with the antagonism I had felt when she first moved into the Saguaro property without permission. The next few days passed with no further news. Mark mentioned that his mother had seemed a bit subdued during their regular Sunday phone call, but he attributed it to the summer heat and her busy schedule with community activities. I maintained my promise not to share Howard's concerns, though the secret weighed on me each time Mark spoke about his mother. Wednesday arrived, the day Patricia was supposed to receive her test results. I found myself checking my phone repeatedly throughout morning meetings, anticipating her call. By late afternoon, with no word from her, I began to worry. Had the news been worse than expected? Was she avoiding the conversation? Finally, at 4:30 p.m., my phone rang with Patricia's number. "I'm sorry for calling so late," she began without preamble. "The appointment took longer than expected." "That's all right," I assured her, closing my office door for privacy. "How did it go?" There was a pause long enough to heighten my concern before Patricia spoke again. "The diagnosis is confirmed TIAs, mini strokes as we discussed. I've had several over the past few weeks, apparently, though I only noticed the one at the community center." My heart sank. "I'm so sorry, Patricia. What's the treatment plan?" "Blood thinners, lifestyle modifications, regular monitoring," she listed matter-of-factly, though I detected a tremor in her voice. The doctor was quite clear that while this isn't immediately life-threatening, it significantly increases my risk for a major stroke if not managed properly. "You need to tell Mark," I said gently. "This isn't something you should handle alone." "I know," she admitted, her voice smaller than I had ever heard it. "But I don't know how. He was so traumatized by his father's decline. The thought of putting him through worry about my health as well." I understood her hesitation. Mark's father had died after a prolonged battle with Parkinson's disease, and the experience had deeply affected him. The prospect of another parent facing serious health issues would be devastating. "Would it help if I were there when you told him?" I offered, surprising myself with the suggestion. Patricia's brief silence conveyed her own surprise. "You would do that?" "Of course," I said simply. "This is important, and it affects all of us. Besides, I think having both of us there might help Mark process the information more calmly." "That's very kind of you, Jessica." Her voice had softened with what sounded like genuine gratitude. "Perhaps we could tell him this weekend. I'd like to organize my thoughts and the doctor's recommendations before discussing it." We arranged for Patricia to come to our house for dinner on Saturday evening, giving her time to adjust to the diagnosis and prepare for the conversation with Mark. After we hung up, I sat at my desk, contemplating how best to support both her and Mark through this challenge. My relationship with Patricia had already evolved beyond anything I could have imagined 6 months ago, and now it was entering yet another new phase. Saturday evening arrived with a tense anticipation that only I understood. Mark had been pleased when I suggested inviting his mother for dinner, viewing it as further evidence of our improving relationship. Patricia arrived precisely on time, looking composed but slightly strained around the eyes. She had dressed carefully in one of her elegant outfits, as if armor against the difficult conversation ahead. I had prepared her favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary potatoes, and set the dining room table with our best dishes. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, designed to provide comfort for the challenging discussion to come. Dinner conversation remained light through the main course, focusing on safe topics like community events at Desert Palms and Mark's current architectural projects. As I cleared the plates and brought out dessert, a homemade apple pie, Patricia caught my eye with a subtle nod. It was time. "Mark," she began, setting down her dessert fork carefully. "There's something important I need to discuss with you." Jessica is already aware, and she's kindly offered her support for this conversation. Mark looked between us, confusion evident on his face. "What's going on? You two aren't typically so mysterious." Patricia took a deep breath. "I've been experiencing some health issues recently. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but serious enough to require ongoing medical attention." Mark's expression shifted immediately to concern. "What kind of health issues? How long has this been happening?" With remarkable composure, Patricia explained the TIA diagnosis, the symptoms she had experienced, and the treatment plan her doctor had outlined. Throughout her explanation, I watched Mark's face cycle through worry, fear, and finally a forced calm that I recognized as his way of processing difficult information. Why didn't you tell me as soon as you noticed symptoms? He asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. I didn't want to worry you unnecessarily, Patricia replied. You've already been through so much with your father's illness. I wanted to have concrete information before discussing it. Mark shook his head, clearly struggling with her reasoning. Mom, I'm not a child who needs protection from difficult realities. I'm your son, and I want to be there for you, especially with health concerns. I know that now, she acknowledged, and I promise to be more forthcoming going forward. Jessica helped me recognize that keeping you in the dark wasn't fair or helpful, regardless of my intentions. Mark glanced at me, surprise evident in his expression. You knew about this? I reached for his hand across the table. I only learned about it recently, through Howard. He was concerned after witnessing one of Patricia's episodes and reached out to me directly. Howard called you instead of me? Mark's voice held a note of hurt. At my request, Patricia interjected quickly. I specifically asked him not to worry you, but he felt someone in the family should know. Since Jessica is both family and my landlord, she was the logical choice. Mark processed this information silently, his fingers tightening around mine. And you decided together to tell me now? The diagnosis was only confirmed on Wednesday, I explained. Patricia wanted some time to come to terms with it herself before discussing it with you. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. That makes sense. I just wish. He trailed off, looking at his mother with concern etched on his features. I know, Patricia said softly. I should have told you sooner. That's a lesson I'm still learning. That sharing burdens doesn't mean burdening others. It means allowing people who care about you to support you. The vulnerability in her admission was striking, especially coming from a woman who had always projected such self-sufficiency and control. Mark moved around the table to embrace his mother, a gesture I had rarely seen between them. We'll figure this out together, Mom. Whatever support you need, we're here for you. Patricia returned the embrace, her usual composure momentarily cracking as she leaned into her son's support. Thank you, dear. I'm already feeling better knowing I don't have to manage this alone. After the initial emotional discussion, we moved to practical matters, understanding the medication regimen, arranging transportation for medical appointments, given Patricia's temporary driving restrictions, and discussing whether any modifications to the cottage might be necessary for her safety. The doctor emphasized that maintaining my independence is important for both physical and psychological health, Patricia explained. But he did suggest some minor safety improvements. Grab bars in the bathroom, better lighting in hallways, that sort of thing. I nodded thoughtfully. Those are reasonable modifications that would benefit any tenant. I'll arrange for installation next week. And I can drive you to appointments whenever needed, Mark added. My schedule is flexible enough to accommodate that. Patricia looked between us, a complex emotion playing across her features. You're both being so supportive. It's more than I expected. The unspoken acknowledgement hung in the air, that her behavior in the past had not always fostered this kind of family unity, that the relationship we were building now was something new and unexpected for all of us. As the evening drew to a close, Patricia prepared to leave, Howard having arranged to pick her up. While we waited for his arrival, she drew me aside in the kitchen while Mark gathered her things. Thank you, Jessica, she said quietly. Not just for facilitating tonight's conversation, but for how you've handled this entire situation. You've shown me more grace than I probably deserved. Family supports family, I replied simply, even when it's complicated. She smiled faintly. At my choice of words, an echo of her own frequent references to family obligations, but reframed in a context of mutual support, rather than manipulation or obligation. I'm learning that family can mean many things, she acknowledged, and that sometimes the strongest family bonds are the ones we build through respect and honesty, not just blood or obligation. It was a profound observation from a woman who had once wielded family as a weapon to get her way. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang, Howard arriving to take Patricia home. As they left, I noticed how naturally Howard offered his arm for support and how easily Patricia accepted it. A woman who had always insisted on complete self-sufficiency, now gracefully acknowledging her need for assistance. It was a small but significant indication of her evolving approach to relationships. Mark joined me on the porch as we watched them drive away. "That went better than I expected," he admitted, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "Mom was actually reasonable about everything." "She's changing," I observed. Or maybe just revealing aspects of herself that were always there but got buried beneath her need for control. Mark nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about that. After Dad died, she became more rigid, more concerned with appearances and control. I think she was trying to create certainty in a world that suddenly felt very uncertain. And now? Now, ironically, another health crisis seems to be helping her find a different kind of security, one based on authentic connections rather than control." The observation resonated with my own thoughts about Patricia's transformation. It's remarkable how people can change when given the right circumstances and motivations. "Speaking of remarkable changes," Mark said, turning to face me, "you and my mother having civil, even warm conversations is something I never thought I'd see. What changed for you?" I considered his question carefully. "I think I started seeing her as a whole person, not just difficult mother-in-law. Someone with her own fears, needs, and history. Once I could see past the behavior that frustrated me to the person beneath, it became easier to respond with empathy rather than defensiveness." Mark kissed my forehead gently. "That's why I love you. You have this amazing capacity to find the humanity in difficult people." "Only after they've pushed me to my absolute limit," I joked, but we both recognized the truth in his observation. The following week brought practical challenges as we implemented Patricia's new healthcare regimen. I arranged for the safety modifications to the cottage, consulting with an occupational therapist to ensure we addressed all potential hazards without making the space feel institutional or undermining Patricia's independence. Mark coordinated a schedule for driving Patricia to medical appointments, sharing the responsibility with Howard, who had become an increasingly important presence in her life. The arrangement highlighted a new dynamic in our family: collaborative care, rather than the tug-of-war for control that had characterized previous interactions. One afternoon, while supervising the installation of grab bars in Patricia's bathroom, I noticed a stack of pamphlets on her kitchen counter. Glancing at them, I was surprised to see they were about various senior living options, from independent living communities to assisted living facilities. When Patricia emerged from the bedroom, where she had been resting, she noticed my attention on the materials. "Just research," she said, a defensive note creeping into her voice. "It's prudent to understand all options for the future." I nodded, careful to keep my expression neutral. "Of course. Planning ahead makes sense." Patricia hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic candor. "The TIAs are a warning sign, Jessica. I'm not naive about what they could mean for my independence long term." "Have you discussed these options with Howard?" I asked gently. A complex emotion crossed her face. "Howard and I have been having some difficult conversations lately. About the future, about what we mean to each other." "Oh?" I kept my tone casual, though I was intensely curious about this development. Patricia sat at the kitchen island, absently rearranging the pamphlets. "He asked me to consider moving in with him. His home is larger, all on one level, and he has a part-time caregiver who helps with household tasks already. This was unexpected." "That sounds like a practical arrangement if you're comfortable with it." "It's more than practical," she admitted, a slight flush coloring her cheeks. "Howard and I have become quite close. The health scare has clarified certain feelings for both of us, I smiled, genuinely happy for her. That's wonderful, Patricia. Howard seems like a good man who cares deeply for you. He is. She agreed, her expression softening. But moving in together would mean giving up my cottage here, breaking our lease agreement, which I take seriously. The fact that her first concern was about our business arrangement rather than manipulating the situation to her advantage represented a fundamental shift in her approach to our relationship. Leases can be modified when circumstances change, I assured her. If you decide that living with Howard is what you want, we can certainly work out an arrangement that makes sense for everyone. Patricia looked relieved. Thank you for being so understanding. Nothing is decided yet, but it's good to know that option exists without causing problems. Can I ask you something personal? I ventured, seizing the moment of openness between us. She nodded, looking slightly wary but willing. Are you happy here? At Desert Palms, I mean? Despite the health challenges, does this feel like the right place for you? Patricia seemed surprised by the question, but considered it thoughtfully. Yes, I am. More than I expected to be, honestly. There's a sense of community here that I hadn't experienced since before Thomas died. People who share similar life experiences, activities that keep me engaged, and now Howard. She smiled slightly. It's become home in a way my condo never was. I'm glad, I said sincerely. That was the outcome I hoped for when I offered you the cottage rental, even if our journey to this point wasn't exactly smooth. Patricia laughed softly, a genuine, warm sound I had rarely heard from her. That's quite an understatement given how we started. Moving into your saguaro property without permission and redecorating it was hardly my finest moment. And yet here we are, I observed. Sometimes the worst beginnings lead to unexpected positive outcomes. She nodded, a contemplative expression replacing her usual carefully controlled facade. I've been reflecting on that a great deal lately. How my behavior affected you, affected Mark, affected so many of my relationships over the years. The health scare has been a wake-up call in more ways than one. How so? I asked, genuinely interested in her perspective. When you face your mortality, even briefly, it clarifies what matters, she explained. Control and appearances suddenly seem far less important than authentic connections, than being truly known and accepted by the people in your life. It was a profound insight, especially coming from someone who had spent years prioritizing control and appearances above almost everything else. I think that's why Howard has become so important to me, she continued. He sees me clearly, my strengths and my flaws, and cares for me anyway. That kind of acceptance is powerful. It is, I agreed, thinking of my relationship with Mark and how his unconditional support had given me the security to pursue my dreams and become my best self. Patricia met my gaze directly, something vulnerable and honest in her expression. I owe you an apology, Jessica. A real one, not just for specific actions like the Saguaro house incident, but for my overall attitude toward you from the beginning. I judged you unfairly, dismissed your career, and tried to maintain control over Mark in ways that undermined your relationship. I was wrong, and I'm genuinely sorry. The apology, offered without qualification or expectation, took me by surprise. It was perhaps the most authentic interaction we had ever shared. Thank you, Patricia, I said simply. I accept your apology. And for what it's worth, I think we've both grown through this complicated relationship of ours. She smiled slightly. Indeed we have, though I suspect your growth curve was less steep than mine. It was a moment of self-deprecating humor I would never have expected from the Patricia I had first met. A woman so defensive about her own perfection that she could never acknowledge her flaws, let alone joke about them. As the workers finished, installing the safety features throughout the cottage, Patricia and I continued our conversation, touching on her treatment progress, Howard's role in her life, and her hopes for maintaining as much independence as possible while managing her health condition. The ease with which we discussed these intimate topics represented a transformation so complete from our early interactions that it almost felt like we were different people. Or perhaps more accurately, like we were finally seeing each other. Clearly, for the first time. When I left the cottage that afternoon, Patricia walked me to my car, moving more confidently than she had been right after her diagnosis. "Jessica," she said as I prepared to leave, "I want you to know something. Whatever happens with my health going forward, whatever decisions I make about living arrangements with Howard or elsewhere, I'm grateful for this time at the cottage. For the chance to rebuild our relationship on better terms." "So am I replied honestly. "It's been an unexpected journey, but a worthwhile one." As I drove away, I reflected on the strange path that had led us here. From the unauthorized takeover of my property to a relationship built on mutual respect and genuine care. It was a reminder that people are always more complex than they first appear, and that even the most difficult relationships can transform when approached with boundaries, empathy, and a willingness to see beyond past hurts to new possibilities. The challenge ahead, Patricia's health issues and the potential changes to our living arrangements, would test this new foundation. But for the first time, I felt confident that we would face those challenges not as adversaries, but as family in the truest sense of the word. People committed to supporting each other through life's unpredictable journey, with all its complications and unexpected gifts. 1 year after Patricia's health diagnosis, I stood in the doorway of what had once been her cottage at Desert Palms. The space was empty now, sunlight streaming through the windows onto freshly cleaned floors. Patricia had moved in with Howard 6 months ago, their relationship having blossomed into something neither of them had expected at this stage of life. The cottage had served its purpose, not just as an investment property, but as the unexpected catalyst for healing a relationship that had once seemed beyond repair. As I did a final walkthrough before the new tenants arrived, I couldn't help but smile at how differently everything had turned out from what I'd initially expected. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Don't forget, dinner at our place. At 6. Howard's making his famous paella." I texted back a quick confirmation, still marveling at how natural it felt to have regular family dinners with my once difficult mother-in-law and her partner. Her health had stabilized with proper medication and monitoring, and the life she was building with Howard seemed to bring out the best in her: warmth, humor, and a newfound ability to connect authentically with others. Mark had commented just last week how different his mother seemed now. More at peace, more present, less concerned with control and appearances than she had been for as long as he could remember. "It's like she finally found her way back to herself," he'd observed. "The person she was before all the defense mechanisms took over." As I locked up the cottage one final time, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us here. What had begun with boundary violations and redecorated rooms had somehow evolved into mutual respect and genuine affection. Later that evening, as we sat around Howard's dining table enjoying paella and wine, Patricia raised her glass in a toast. "To unexpected beginnings," she said, her eyes meeting mine with warm understanding. "And to the family we choose to build, conflicts and all." I raised my glass to meet hers, recognition passing between us of just how far we'd come. The mother-in-law who had once moved into my property without permission now felt like genuine family, not by obligation, but by choice. Some lessons arrive in packages we'd never willingly select, but sometimes those unwelcome packages contain exactly the gifts we need most. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.